It's time to take another look at a range of Windows-based handhelds, and with a very specific purpose. We're going to be testing the most advanced, the most powerful hardware on the market right now, the actual big boys of the handheld range, and we're going to be challenging them with the very latest games. No more PS4 ports or cross-gen titles. We'll be looking at actual current-gen experiences built primarily for the 9th generation of consoles, led by the likes of Alan Wake 2, Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, and Horizon Forbidden West's PlayStation 5 only DLC, Burning Shores. Can they cope? You'll find out here, though the B-roll I'm running right now is already painting a fairly positive picture, right? Okay, let's get back to the handhelds and look at the lineup. First of all, the Lenovo Legion Go, the primary competitor to the ASUS Rog Ally. A massive 8.8-inch LCD, 2560 by 1600, 60, 120, 144 Hz support, Z1 Extreme processor, 16 gigs of memory, detachable Joy-Con-like controllers, a 49.2 watt-hour battery. It's attractively priced for sure, bearing in mind all of this hardware, certainly compared to our other contenders. I'd like to do a full review on this one as it has so much to commend it, but I'm waiting for a driver update before doing that, and you'll see why later in the video. Next up, the OneXPlayer 2 Pro, 8.4-inch 2560 by 1600 screen, 60 Hz only though, Ryzen 7 7840U, which is to all intents and purposes identical to the Legion Go's Z1 Extreme, 32 gigs of memory this time, and once again, detachable controllers, after a fashion, but more on that in a bit. This one's even chunkier than the Legion Go, a proper chonker you might say, housing a 65.5 watt-hour battery. Finally, the AyaNeo Kun, the ultimate handheld currently produced by that vendor. Similar to the OneXPlayer 2 Pro, you're getting an 8.4-inch 2560 by 1600 screen that runs at 60 Hz. The same Ryzen 7 7840U processor and a gargantuan 64 gigs of LPDDR5 memory. No detachable controllers, but you do get the largest battery of them all. 75 watt-hours, bigger than the batteries in many laptops. This is a big deal, bearing in mind that poor battery life is the bane of Windows handhelds. Another interesting element of the Kun is that you can actually max out TDP at 54 watts. On the one hand, say goodbye to your battery life. On the other, it is a point of differentiation against the competition, which tends to max out at 30 watts. I mean, this is a monster. This is essentially a Windows laptop in a handheld shell. So the story so far: similar processors, similarly large screens, though the Legion Go is even bigger. Similar I/O too. All of them have dual USB-C ports. All of them, bar the OneXPlayer, have full-size USB Type-A sockets as well. Legion Go and OneXPlayer have detachable controllers, but there is a key difference here. The Go controllers snap off and essentially work like Switch Joy-Cons, but disconnecting the OneXPlayer controllers results in, well, nothing. You need to hook up a secondary hub to turn those controllers into a wireless joypad. Don't think it's worth the bother, to be honest. The Kun has dual trackpads, the Go has one of them, which is fine actually, but the OneXPlayer doesn't have them at all. As these devices are large and heavy with big screens, there is provision for tabletop play. Just like the Switch, both Kun and OneXPlayer have plastic clip-out kickstands, which are a little flimsy but do get the job done. However, the Legion Go does the job properly with a much larger, sturdier kickstand, similar to what you've seen on like a Microsoft Surface tablet or indeed the Switch OLED. Let's get into performance then, and we're going to kick off with a 15-watt shootout. 15 watts is important because it extends the battery life, but on the flip side, it leaves the Z1 Extreme and 7840U processors power-starved, limiting their performance, which explains what's happening here in Cyberpunk 2077. Steam Deck, both LCD and OLED models, are outperforming the Windows handhelds by between 3 to 5%, despite having a much less capable processor. Legion Go had issues with our benchmarking workflow, so it's out of the picture here at 720p, but we'll look at it at 1080p a bit later. But I have included Rog Ally here using the same processor. However, this advantage for the deck. It's not the case for all games, and Forza Horizon 5 is significantly more performant at the same wattage on the more powerful Ryzen-based processors. AyaNeo Kun here came out best with a 36 percentage point lead over the Steam Deck OLED, rising to 44% over the LCD model. OneXPlayer and Rog Ally are in the same ballpark, as you can see, so there's essentially two distinct groupings of results here. You'll also note stutter on the two decks that the Windows-based machines simply do not have. No such differentiation here in A Plague Tale Requiem, however, where performance in this opening segment of the game is very similar across the board. The handhelds jostle for position at 15 watts, with the OneXPlayer delivering marginally superior results, followed by AyaNeo Kun. Rog Ally marginally slower overall than the Steam Deck OLED, but the deck LCD is trailing the pack. I mean, bearing in mind the far superior CPU and GPU and more advanced process node used by all of the Windows machines, it's remarkable to see the deck so competitive, but ultimately, Valve's processor is tailor-made for handhelds. These newer chips, they're more designed with the laptop market in mind. They're designed to be run with much higher power budgets. Finally, a look at Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered. It's actually the closest grouping of results seen so far. Deck LCD lags with a 48 FPS average, followed by the Kun at 50.3, but all other results are in the 51 to 52 FPS range. It's results like this that highlight why Steam Deck, and specifically the OLED model, remain our preferred overall choice for PC handhelds. You get good battery life, you get reasonable performance, you get a far superior user interface, but you will find system limits on the latest games, whereas the Z1 Extreme and 7840U allow you to trade battery life for a lot more performance by raising that TDP. Now let's get a bit more serious by moving up to 1080p resolution and increasing TDP to 25 watts. I've chosen that specific power level because it's a bit of a sweet spot. It's diminishing returns beyond that, as you'll see. And 25 watts is the limit for portable play on ASUS Rog Ally, which is probably the best-selling Windows-based handheld. Anyway, the point is that there's no 25 watt support on Steam Deck, so that's out of the picture. But we can benchmark the Lenovo Legion Go here. Back to Cyberpunk 2077, and what do you know? 25 watt TDPs on both Z1 Extreme on the Ally and Go are delivering identical results to the 7840U found in the Kun and the OneXPlayer 2 Pro. The outlier here is frame delivery on Legion Go. I'm reminded of early results from my first Rog Ally review back in the day. There are clear pacing issues here and some egregious stutter. The drivers are old on the Go, and I've been told by Lenovo that new drivers are en route. Right now though, on a title-by-title basis, there can be some issues. Forza Horizon 5 follows a similar trajectory with all devices performing in a very similar manner. Though the AyaNeo Kun has a slight advantage across the length of the bench. I mean, this could be down to variation in thermals, anything really. Again, I'm seeing problems with the Legion Go, which has clear and obvious stuttering issues, just as the ASUS Rog Ally had back in the day, once again. Now, we use a video capture workflow, so one potential failure point in our system is that maybe video output may not represent what's visible on the mobile screen. However, the stuttering is so egregious you can't fail to notice it, and it is indeed there on the integrated display, and it is not on the other devices. Again, the Rog Ally had this issue back in the day, but it's not a problem now with fresh testing on the latest firmware and drivers, so my conclusion here is that Lenovo needs to catch up, either on those drivers or with firmware updates. Plague Tale Requiem next, and it's much the same story. No real difference at all with the exception of Legion Go, which does have a slightly strange update cadence, but thankfully the frame time variance is not that much different to the naked eye. I've played a fair amount of this one on the Legion Go and it works great and looks gorgeous even on supposedly low settings. Finally, Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered. To complete the set, it's just a 2 percentage point variance between the systems here, with the exception of the Legion Go, which once again has some problems. More noticeable stutter and less even frame delivery. So perhaps you can see now why I want to wait with my Lenovo Legion Go review, the full review, until those updates arrive. So that's the 25 watt lineup then. But all of these devices can hit 30 watts too, and of course the AyaNeo Kun can run up to 54 watts off battery. But honestly, diminishing returns kick in after 20 watts really, and I think 25 watts for handheld play probably the best option. To illustrate, here's the AyaNeo Kun benched across 15, 25, 30 and the top end 54 watts. And in Cyberpunk here, there's a mammoth 42% increase in performance, moving to 25 watts from 15 watts, then just a 6-point boost from 30 watts versus 25 watts. To emphasize that 25 watt sweet spot, 54 watts over twice the power delivers just 11.5% more performance. You do get extra CPU performance from that power boost, but you rarely actually see it making a difference in games. Performance differentials are worse in Forza here, just 25% more performance moving to 25 watts from 15 watts, while at the top end, 54 watts gives you just 32.5% more throughput than 15 watts. Kinda nuts, right? Plague Tale sees a 36 percentage point bump from 25 watts versus 15 watts, but 30 watts offers just a 3.7% boost, while 54 watts is a mere 8 points faster than 25 watts. Spider-Man 30% of extra performance, 25 watts versus 15, just 4 points more, 30 versus 25, and a paltry 10% of extra throughput at 54 watts versus 25 watts. So it's nice, I guess, for the AyaNeo to offer such a wide range of performance and power options. But yeah, 30 watts max is fine, overkill even. Now onto battery life, crucial for these Windows handhelds and universally poor when it comes to AAA gaming for sure. Simple test here, this scene from A Plague Tale Requiem running at 1080p with balanced upscaling and a 30 FPS cap at 25 watts. We've established 25 watts as being the sweet spot in providing an actual performance boost over Steam Deck, so that's where we're measuring battery life. Why have a 30 FPS cap? Well, yes, we could run the GPUs flat out with unlocked frame rates, but that's going to make relatively poor battery life results even worse for a less consistent gameplay experience. Screen technologies are different, of course, between all of the handhelds here, but I'm running them all maxed out in terms of brightness. This will introduce some variance in the scores, of course, unrelated to power draw at the SoC and memory and storage level, but it is what it is. So let's dig in. There's some interesting results in this, but it's of little surprise to find that the ASUS Rog Ally with just a 40 watt-hour battery comes in last. 57 minutes, 55 seconds of play. Just under an hour then. Lenovo Legion Go with its nigh on 50 watt-hour battery does better with almost 1 hour, 19 minutes of gameplay. So the much larger, much more vibrant screen doesn't appear to be having any impact on battery life. That's followed by the OneXPlayer 2 Pro with its 65.5 watt-hour battery delivering almost 106 minutes of gaming. Slightly more efficient overall than the Legion Go, but it isn't running a 144Hz screen, so perhaps to be expected. The OneXPlayer also scores well against the AyaNeo Kun. You're getting an extra 10 watt-hours of battery capacity, but that's only translating into about an extra 6 minutes of gaming. Anything over an hour and a half is pretty good going, I'd say. It's pretty much the kind of battery life I had with the original Steam Deck running AAA games, and I managed to live with that. But even so, all of these results are pretty low overall, certainly compared to the Steam Deck OLED. The surprise is how inefficient the Rog Ally is relative to its battery size. Finally, let's go back to the promise made at the beginning of the video and look at the 25 watt experience on the latest, most challenging games. Can't test the games on every system, and as we've seen Lenovo Legion Go apart, the experience is essentially interchangeable at similar wattages anyway. I settled on using the OneXPlayer 2 Pro for all of the following captures, but note that the 16 gig systems like Rog Ally and Legion Go may require manual tweaking of the VRAM allocation. On the OneXPlayer 2 Pro, this is achieved in the BIOS, and I set it to 8 GB of VRAM, leaving 24 gigs for the rest of the system. The thing is, adjusting memory like this is starting to become more important, and you shouldn't need to adjust this in the BIOS. Thankfully, the AyaNeo products and the Ally allow you to make the change within their software. I want to start with Alan Wake 2 actually, as it's ultra demanding on GPU but very light on CPU, and settings wise I went with the PlayStation 5's performance mode preset mapped into the PC settings. Essentially the low preset with medium textures and medium scattered object density. My aim was to hit a minimum of 30 frames per second. A locked 30 frames per second would be nice, but unfortunately there's no half-rate VSync option in Alan Wake 2, and I've yet to find a Windows handheld that has a decent inbuilt 30 FPS limit with proper frame pacing. Anyway, for fun, here's how the OneXPlayer with 7840U at 25 watts stacks up against the PS5 on the same settings, the difference being resolution of course. We're at 1440p FSR2 balance mode on the PS5, 720p with various FSR presets on the handheld. Interesting to note that vastly different internal resolutions are not making that much difference. We're not CPU limited, so I expect something quite different is the bottleneck there. Still, 720p FSR2 balance mode on the handheld has 54% of the performance of the PS5 version in 1440p FSR2 balance mode. However, switching PS5 to its quality mode, which is essentially PC on medium, offers up closer performance. 2160p FSR2 balance mode on PS5 with the higher settings is just 4% faster than handheld 720p balance mode, with the performance mode preset settings engaged. And that's an equitable compromise overall, I think, for a handheld experience. There's a reason why we choose this area for stress testing. It's really hard on the GPU, and the majority of gameplay isn't quite that intense. Most gameplay in the taxing forest area is actually in the mid-30s, even when foliage and overall scene density is very high. Yes, Alan Wake 2 does play nicely on a handheld, and it still looks awesome. And in actual fact, moving into the town of Bright Falls itself, where density and foliage is significantly reduced, performance is significantly higher. We're into 40 FPS territory here. So interesting stuff here overall, and in actual fact we're operating on quality settings that are slightly higher than the Xbox Series S version of the game, resolution targets aside. But yeah, still in very similar shape in performance terms to the Series S experience. It would be possible to achieve 30 FPS with consistent frame pacing, but not via any of the frame rate limiters available to any of the handhelds. We'd need to be installing and looking at Chaldean's Special K to get the job done. But really, Remedy should be sorting this. It would be very beneficial to the PC version in general, especially running on older hardware like, say, NVIDIA Pascal-based GPUs. Next up, Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, which does have a half refresh rate VSync, which does properly respect consistent frame pacing. It can be done, and there are DirectX system calls to do it. We just need to see developers support them, as we're seeing here. The game plays out well, and even on lowest of the low settings, it still looks pretty phenomenal on a handheld, I've got to say. However, one thing worth pointing out is that regardless of output resolution, Avatar operates at an absolute minimum of 720p native. I'm using TAA here instead of FSR2, as even if you set up FSR2 with performance mode or quality mode or whatever, the base resolution will always be 720p. So it's best to turn off upscaling reconstruction altogether, stick to TAA and reap an actual increase in performance from doing so. I mean, I would have liked to have matched PS5 performance mode settings here, but you need upscaling to do so. And that's just not viable at 720p. Reflection quality on water surfaces isn't great, and you're missing a lot of the micro detail that looks so awesome in this game. But on the handheld screen and with the reduced 720p resolution, you don't actually feel as though you're missing that much. Avatar still looks great and runs really well, really consistently, with only minor frame rate wobbles. It would be nice to see the lower bounds on native resolution lowered to better support handheld play, and maybe even bring Steam Deck into contention. But in a game with this level of density and the sheer amount of transparencies in play, I do wonder how well FSR2 would hold up anyway. In the meantime though, Z1 Extreme and 7840U class hardware can run this genuinely next generation game, and while the compromises are pronounced, they're far less impactful when playing on a smaller screen. It's pretty awesome to see this running at all, actually, I'd say. And you could say the same for Horizon Forbidden West, the Burning Shores DLC here. Running this here at 720p resolution with half-rate VSync, capping us to 30 frames per second. I'm using dynamic resolution scaling in combination with XeSS machine learning based upscaling. However, I have swapped in the new 1.3 version of the XeSS DLL, replacing the existing DLL in the game install folder. 1.3 resolves better image quality, particularly egregious with particle ghosting on the stock version of XeSS the game ships with. Settings wise, we don't need to be running at the absolute minimums either, far from it. I'm using the medium setting by and large and letting dynamic resolution scaling do the heavy lifting. You can actually run a lot of the content at higher resolutions on the same settings, even 1080p, but dynamic resolution scaling doesn't cover all eventualities. And once you hit the Burning Shores content specifically, performance buckles, hence the drop here to 720p, which effectively solves almost all of the GPU related limitations. I say most because the core game itself still has problems that need addressing. The most obvious one being the stuttering performance found in the more demanding cinematics, as you can see here in the Burning Shores main introduction. Gameplay runs just fine though, even in combat, even with a lot of GPU intensive effects work in play. Medium settings are not high settings, obviously, therefore it's not on par visually with PlayStation 5, but then again, quality reductions on a smaller screen, as I've said, they're far less impactful. You can't really say that this isn't a good looking game. I mean, this is Horizon Forbidden West on a handheld. It's looking really impressive, I've got to say. So you need to accept that compromise is necessary, but the AMD-based handhelds once again prove they are up to the task. The only potential pitfalls come from poor PC ports, of course. Thankfully, we've had a pretty decent run recently on the titles that I've highlighted here at least, so let's quickly sum up where I'm at with the various handhelds tested in this lineup. First of all, Lenovo Legion Go is by far the most well-made device I'm looking at today. Build quality is great, while the 8.8-inch screen is huge. It's really impressive. I genuinely like the hardware. I love the device, but I think the software needs to be better, and it needs support for more modern drivers, or whatever else it is that's causing the frame time inconsistencies. Rog Ally used to be the same, but it is improved now, so fingers crossed the same thing will happen with the Go. I'd like to see a larger battery too, but really, as much as I love the screen, I really would have preferred 1080p with VRR, which remains the Ally's key USP. A gaming handheld just doesn't need a 1600p screen. Okay then, so OneXPlayer 2 Pro. Impressive battery life, judged in relation to other Windows handhelds. Screen quality is good, but again, resolution is too high. And the 60Hz panel basically means you're targeting 30 or 60 FPS, and vanishingly few modern AAA games ever get closer to 60 on these handhelds. The detachable controllers requiring a hub to function like Joy-Cons is a missed opportunity, and the form factor of the machine frankly huge in comparison to the others, even the Legion Go, particularly in terms of its depth there. It's really thick. I did like the accessories available though. There's even an old Surface style keyboard that transforms it into a mini laptop of sorts. Yeah, these things are essentially refactored laptops, so why not have that functionality? Software side of things though is a bit threadbare, especially compared to all the other handhelds here. AyaNeo Kun, I'm not sure display vibrancy is as good as the Go or the OneXPlayer 2 Pro, and once again there's just no need for a 2560 by 1600 screen. 1080p with VRR would have been a much better choice. But you know, AyaNeo, these guys know what they're doing in creating handheld PCs. Lord knows they've made enough of them, and I do think this is their best yet overall. And yeah, they've thrown everything they can at the specs here. I mean, 64 gigs of memory is nuts, but there it is. I also think that ASUS software is pretty good. Only the Rog Ally's is better, I'd say, at this point. Speaking of which, I'd have preferred more memory, but the Rog Ally remains a great handheld, spoiled to a certain extent by a battery that's clearly just too small. However, its software has improved greatly, and Steam Deck aside, it's the only PC handheld out there that lets you game with more consistent frame times beyond 30 frames per second, thanks to its VRR screen. Now, compared to the Legion Go and the OneXPlayer 2 Pro, that display is somewhat washed out, nowhere near as vibrant, but VRR, or a tweakable Steam Deck style refresh rate is crucial to these handhelds. And VRR right now remains a USP and indeed a game changer for the Rog Ally. These handhelds keep on coming though, so I'm sure that at some point we will get that unicorn product, perhaps in concert with the Windows level upgrades that all of these devices desperately need and that Phil Spencer has promised. But that's it for now. Like, subscribe, share if you enjoyed the content, and ring the little bell icon for notifications that will hopefully lead you to brand new DF videos. And of course, the DF supporter program. Join us to gain access to our amazing community, DF Direct privileges, early access and high quality video downloads of everything we do, and indeed everything we have done since 2016. And yes, if you fancy turning yourself into a walking advert for Digital Foundry, go to store.digitalfoundry.net to check out our various merchandising wares. But that's all from me on this one. Thanks for watching and supporting Digital Foundry.